Hello, David Zritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I see a lot of great people in the comment section. You're here. You're here for a book club. Which book club? It is, of course, the Goldfinger, Ian Fleming's Goldfinger, and it is all part of hashtag Fleming Reading Challenge. And we've got some surprises in store for you today. First of all, I do want to kind of kick things off with something pretty exciting because, you know, we've gotten a bit sophisticated. Yeah, and we have Joe Darlington to thank. I don't like kicking off the show thanking Joe Darlington, but I have to because he introduced us to some new software. Listen, if it goes really well today, you want to thank me. If it goes poorly, it's Joe's fault, I guess is what I'm saying. So let's kick off the show. Here we go. I told you, we're going to get fancy. And that was a Darlington presentation. So thanks for that, Joe. So listen, great comments coming in right now. I can see the comments, but here's really something very cool with this new technology. You are going to be more a part of the conversation now than ever. For example, I'm going to be able to pull you into the show. Let's take a look. So Adriana 17, greetings from Hertfordshire, UK. Well, that's very nice. We've got our own Joe Darlington saying very welcome. Yes, I'm able to literally pull in your conversation and we'll be able to ask my co-host, who we're going to introduce very soon, questions. So here's what you need to do. We want your comments. We want your questions. We want conflict, dynamic conflict. No, we want subtle conflict. This is the Bond community here. And I hope that you're sitting back and enjoying maybe an adult beverage. It is Saturday. So first of all, in the chat, let me know what you're having. If you do have an adult libation, if you have water and coffee, that's cool too. Me, I decided to go themed. All right. So I have a tiny, tiny bottle of Maker's Mark. It is Kentucky bourbon. And of course, how am I kicking things off? I have a double bourbon and I've put it in my Dr. No ice bucket, which my son popped my bubble by saying it looked like a clear paint can, and I'm like, dude, I spent like 6 months trying to find this on eBay. So I'm going to put some ice in here because Bond does have a little bit of ice. First of all, he drinks bourbon throughout. And I just want to thank everybody for being here. So cheers to all of you. Oh, that double bourbon. Yes. And Bill Koenig, my good friend and nostalgia maniac, cut from the same cloth. He says, double bourbon. Well played, David. How could I not? How could I not do that? We've got Tiki Bond. No branch water yet. No, I'm going to probably be... I've got a little bit of branch water from good old Pennsylvania. It's not the Kentucky type that I'll water it down later, but not yet. No, I need something strong after that, coming back from Mexico, that really tough thing. All right, we're going to kick it off. Here we go, folks. And by the way, if you hear a pause, it's because I'm getting used to this software. It is January and February 1958 in Jamaica at Goldeneye. And as the story goes, directly from the people at Goldeneye, Ian Fleming writes Goldfinger. It's released in 1959. Now, you know how Fleming does it. He writes about 2,000 words a day. This is coming off some great success with Dr. No, at least some revenue success. It was middling kind of critical review, but he's on a high. And he writes this, and at the time, he was really into collecting gold, specifically gold doubloons. As a matter of fact, you all know that he commissioned the Royal Typewriter Company to make a gold typewriter. He had a little bit of an obsession with gold. So, of course, something that focused on gold made a lot of sense. But here's the thing. This is a big conversation. It's a big book. I mean, it's a nice big book. I love the smell of old paperbacks. What is that? Is it must? Is it maggots? I don't know. I love it. Pulp. That's what it is. I've got to introduce people to help me with this conversation. The first gentleman, I think you're going to recognize. Let's welcome him to the stream, JW. JW, welcome.
Hello, hello. Honor to be here. I'm so excited today to be talking Goldfinger with you guys.
You seem excited. You're teeming with excitement.
I am ready for this. It's great. It was a great reread. So I don't normally get to talk about the book, so this is really exciting.
Now, which paperback did you read? You know, Tiki Bond over here in the chat says this is his favorite paperback cover, but there are so many different versions. Did you do audio? Did you do paperback? What did you do?
I actually doubled up, and I did the most recent paperback version because I wanted to write in it. I wanted to highlight it. And then I listened to the most recent version of the audiobook. Hugh Bonneville, I believe is his name, the series that was produced by Lucy Fleming. So I doubled down. But I have that edition that you have, and that series is really cool. Those covers are fantastic.
They're so great. And I don't know what it is, but a couple people are mentioning what that smell is, and I don't think I should inhale it. It's very close to asbestos. No, it's not true. And by the way, JW, this is exciting because next week you and I have a joint video coming out. You've kicked off something that you've been toying with for some time. It is a new channel called The Bond Closet. What exactly is The Bond Closet? Yes.
I decided, after 4+ years of engaging in the Bond community, that it was perhaps time that I got my own channel, not my own channel, but my own Instagram that is relatable to a channel. I am still JW from James Bond Radio, the music of Bond, always will be. So let's be clear about that. So it's really cool. It's just about, the clothes, which I have an affinity for, which I really haven't talked too much about other than on your channel. All the traveling that I've been able to do, continuing to do, and just the overall lifestyle of being in the Bond community. It was you, David, who inspired me to do this and said, you got some things you need to say and you need to put that out there. And I have been truly touched in just a mere 10 days how many people have followed me and all the wonderful comments and everyone reposting, my Instagram logo. So it's been really great. Very appreciative to everyone. Thank you.
It's great. It's exciting. And you're bringing a lot to the table. By the way, Luann Waters, your ex-girlfriend from high school, just jumped on, said, hi, John, just by chance. I saw this. Glad I'm here. I love you.
That is actually my mother.
Oh, it's your mother.
Yeah. Hi, Mom.
Mommy was bad. Mommy was very bad.
Yeah, it's interesting. My mom,
sorry, Luann.
It's my mom. She's really gotten into especially Cue the Music and your channel. Oh. So she's popping up all over. Thanks, Mama.
Luann, cheers for being here. Would she be having a libation this early in the day?
I'm sure she is. She is on a beach in Mexico.
Your son is such a mensch. That's Yiddish for good guy. But hey, John, JW, I'll tell you what, this is big. I mean, this is Goldfinger. This is Grand Slam big. Yeah. I invited you because I needed somebody to really represent, the lifestyle moments. James Bond is a character, and you do that so well. But we need to bring an author in here. I mean, Absolutely. We need to have kind of that Fleming pen. So welcome to the show. Amidst several bites of snacks that he's having, I see you, Roland. Roland Hume, welcome.
Hello, David. Hey, JW. How are you both doing?
We're doing great.
Very well.
Better that you're on. What were you just snacking on?
Dry roasted peanuts, and yeah,
delicious, delicious. By the way, JW, and I didn't even ask you, what are you drinking today with us?
Well, I'll tell you what. I ended up in a tiki bar last night, and I was on the way out of Palm Springs, and we ended up stopping at a tiki bar. I ended up not leaving Palm Springs last night. Today I'm drinking iced coffee and water. And no booze, and I don't know that I'll ever be drinking again, to be honest with you.
That is honest. You know what? I think by the second hour of this, you'll be drinking.
Could do. I'm horrible at promises. So.
I've seen you do this before, where you say, I can't drink a thing, and then 8:30 a.m. rolls by.
I'm a weak man. It doesn't take much.
No. Roland, what are you having today? What's your libation?
You see, you're on theme with bourbon and stuff like that. I actually was going to crack open a bottle of Red Stripe. I'm a month late.
But that's delicious.
Yeah.
We'll get into the... Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I had a thing, though. Like, I was drinking it last time, and I don't know if anyone's ever tried this, but try putting lime in it. If you're like, I've got a big bottle there. You put the lime on and you do the whole thing and you squish it in. It's like a totally different beer. It's changed my drinking experience.
I'll tell you what, if you take the Red Stripe and you do this in Jamaica, you put a Red Stripe, you put in the coconut, you put the lime in the coconut, and then you drink it in the morning. No, you put the lime in the coconut and you drink it in the morning. You drink it all day long. It's amazing. Sorry, I couldn't resist. And that's our show.
We're here all week, folks.
And by the way, I literally just started sipping. So, Bill Koenig says you can't go wrong with Red Stripe. So if it's Bill Koenig approved, I think we're all good here.
You're a smart man, Bill.
Everybody's saying hello right now. So this is interesting. Nicholas Slayton says, JW, as a SoCal Tiki fan, I support the Tiki drinks. Keep it up.
Jocelyn from Ladies Who Bond is big on Tiki.
Yeah, there's a great one, bootlegger tiki that I discovered last night. And they were going down so smooth, but they're quite powerful. And I forgot that.
Oh, yeah, you got to be careful of that.
Eyebrow.
You know, the 151 that goes in after they've made it. Whoa, seemed like a good idea at the time. But tiki is Bond. Hey, what are you going to do?
Yeah, no, it's one and the same. So here's the thing. We've got to acknowledge that, Roland, this was a very reciprocal discussion you and I had before you became a co-host because, and we need to talk about this. Number one, I selfishly wanted to invite you because everybody should know Roland is a bona fide author. This is his newest book, Knucklehead's Motorcycle Club book, No Way Out. And there is his name. So he's not lying. But more importantly, the books that he writes, which I've consumed some, my wife has consumed many, mix action, spy genre, and just a little bit of bodice ripping sexuality and sensuality while you're at it. And I wanted to bring you on here because there's some interesting discussion around women and Bond women and sensuality in this book. But you wanted to come on this show for a different reason. What was that reason?
I think that was a very, very nice reinterpretation of me basically being like, David, please, can I be on the Goldfinger discussion? Because I have so many opinions. And it's funny because it's a book to me that it stood vividly out among all the James Bond books because it resonated really a lot with me. And in some ways, when I first read it, I was 17, 18, I think. And it was the book that made me fall in love with the idea of moving to America because it describes everything that happens in like such vivid detail. You could almost imagine yourself being there. And I fell in love with the idea of America and traveling by trains and doing all these glamorous things. But also as a writer, I think it's his worst book because I think there are certain aspects to it that fall really flat, and I'm sure we'll get into those. And it's this weird thing. It's my favorite book, but I also think it's his worst. And there are
Roland, hold on a second.
Ooh, I'm going to get in so much trouble, I know.
And that was Roland Hume, ladies and gentlemen. Send poison pen letters to
the book club.
First of all, literally, I thought it was because you had red hair. And you were like, I want to talk about the ginger villain.
Oh, I do.
Oh, because you went into this whole thing about like all this other stuff. And I'm like, what happened to the premise of the gingers?
Oh, no. I mean, that's one of the things. They talk about James Bond being, sex, sadism, and snobbery. And there's so many aspects of this Goldfinger, like talk about the snobbery that goes on and the way people look at each other and the way Goldfinger and Bond, when they first met, size each other up. It was so interesting. Because, the thing that really, I hadn't actually read this book for probably 20 years before I begged you to let me talk here. So I read it again. And it was one thing that really struck me that I hadn't noticed the first time was, Mr. DuPont is talking about his club, the Floridana, and it says, Goldfinger can't be a Jew because, we don't allow them in this club. And I was just like, it's 1958 when he wrote that. I mean, it's 10 years before you were born, David. And like they had places where you, just as a matter of course, like Jews weren't allowed in there. And that startled me, that how close in our lifetime something like that.
You're like on page 9 and we're still on page 1.
I'm going to those moments.
Hold on
there's
a
a lot of moments in this book you just go, woo.
Yeah, you're going right to the main themes. All right.
Love it. Hang on real quick. I got a question for Roland.
Yeah.
Roland, for those of us who haven't read any of your books, shame on us. Where do we start?
Oh, so David was had set me up beautifully for that, and I went off on a completely different tangent. So I started off as a romance author, writing under a pen name, and I was quite successful with that. And some people said that my books might appeal to both a male audience and a female audience. In fact, I think the first conversation David and I ever had, he looked at a copy of one of my first spy novel written under my own name, and he said, "That's really interesting. Probably wouldn't read that because there's a bare-chested guy on the cover." And it did start making me think that I'm writing these books that have a lot of action and adventure and motorcycles and explosions.
Can I interject for a second before
Yes.
I get like more hate mail? What I said was, I don't think I would sit on a plane with a book like that because it looked a little Playgirlish. Not that there's anything wrong with Playgirl. It's just that it's not my magazine of choice.
I think that's, and I think, I don't think men would necessarily buy a book that, this is had this kind of cover, because that's a bit lurid and stuff. But I talked to Amazon, so it's okay. So I decided to repackage them as books that might appeal to men as well. So I designed a cover. So this book today, No Way Out, is sort of the book you want to start with. It's the first book in my big motorcycle club series, and I don't know, I'm really passionate about it because I love writing romance stories, but I love having guns and explosions and motorcycles in. And so it's kind of fun to share it with a new audience. But if you look this one up online today on Amazon, the ebook edition that you can download to your Kindle is free. So yeah, if that sounds vaguely interesting, go and check it out.
And we were going to do that at the end. We'll do it again at the end. I've lost entire control, and it's only 17 minutes in. That's a record. That is a record. But this is what you get with JW and Roland. I love it. All right, and this is what happens when JW doesn't drink and he sips water. Gentlemen, we've got to jump into this book. So let me just kind of bend this a little bit. There's a couple facts that I think we need to start with. First of all, let's talk about the building, the creation of this book. Fleming completed this novel, and he was conversing with a lot of his friends and even people in Jamaica around Goldeneye. And one of the things he said was, it's probably one of the easiest books he's ever written. He thought at the time it was easy because literally he took every plot that he had out there, every moment with James Bond, and he put it into this book. He even said to a good friend of his, William Plomer, good friend who did all of his proofreading, he said, "William, that's the last full-length folio on Bond. I'm never going to write a full Bond book again. I shall never be able to give him 70,000 words." Now, let's start off. JW, we're going to start with you. Here's the first question we want to get into. It's an overall question. Don't get too deep because we will get deep.
Okay.
Those 70,000 words to some people are cherished. What's your overall thought on the book?
I've only read it previously once. And reading it for the book club, I quickly realized this book has just shot up my pecking order. I mean, I think this is my third favorite Bond book. I enjoyed it so much. It was just a page turner. I think it's fantastic. It's interesting that you say that it was the easiest book, simply because it feels to me like Fleming is in full flight. And I think if it was easy, that's a good thing, because he's just so dialed in by this point. It's book 7, I believe. And so overall thought is I'm giving it 2 big thumbs up.
Nice.
Highly
I'm happy to hear that, because I want people to be excited about it. Not Perfected Yet has a really interesting comment. And by the way, Not Perfected Yet, I don't know if you've noticed, he does reviews right before his own reviews of the books. before we
cool.
do them, and I read every single one of them. They're really good. He says it might have been easy right for Fleming as it's quite derivative of Moonraker, and we're going to get into that when we talk about the plot. But Roland, you've already given us a taste, oh boy, of like castor oil. What's your overall thought on the book?
I did warn you that I'm quite passionate about this book in particular.
I love it.
But so as I said, I remember reading this book when I was 17 or 18 when I was first starting. I'd never been to America. I had dreams ever since I was a kid of going to America. And this book, just for some reason, the writing in this book, the descriptions and the way he talks about everything that happens is just so visceral. It just resonated with me so deeply. It kind of made me fall in love with the idea of going to America and New York City and all its glory, and Miami Beach and those huge trains thundering between them. That description of the meal they have, and we'll get into this, was that struck with me. That made my mouth water when I read it. Yeah,
so hungry when reading that, like on a Sunday night at 10 o'clock, going, no, don't do it. Just don't get up. Stay in bed. Don't go to the refrigerator. I mean,
so this book to me really dug in there, and there were certain other aspects that really got me. But at the same time, now that I'm a writer, it makes me sort of think about it in terms of plotting and detail and stuff. But I'll tell you one thing: I ordered this paperback copy so I could do exactly what JW did and highlight certain passages and things like that. But the simple act of sitting down and like reading a paperback, I read a lot, but I normally read to like learn something or to read it just out of sheer pleasure. It was like meditation. Like it would take me half an hour to read a chapter, and I got up afterwards and I just felt amazing. It was like, shoving a broom to my brain and getting all the junk out, because it is just so beautifully written and so immersive in a way that I don't think any of his other books are.
It's a great point, and I've got to kind of share my own experience. My overall thought of the book was very strange. I have to admit, it took me a few starts to really kind of get into it, and I had been hearing two different things from people. They were like, meh, or like, oh my gosh, this thing is like manna from heaven. So I was kind of like, which one am I going to be? I have to tell you, from an overall standpoint, I wound up actually liking the more Superman, fantastical, thing of Dr. No. I loved his descriptions of Dr. No so much that when I jumped into this, it felt like it was almost like he was going at too fast of a pace. He was trying to get too many characters in there. And dare I say this, and we're going to talk about this in 2 moments. I know that he fleshed out Bond like he had never fleshed out Bond before, but I found Bond to be, a little bit human, too human in some cases, where I kind of like my Bond to be an action superhero, which he was from Dr. No. So literally pivoting from Dr. No to this, I had a little trouble. When I gave myself into it, when I just closed my eyes and surrendered, I really found a lot of enjoyment. And it was mostly with things like Goldfinger, locations, and lifestyle, of which we'll all get into. And let's actually take a look at some of the comments, because what I love about this is we got A. Bergness saying, I love the Fort Knox scene where Bond throws golden bars at Oddjob. I think he's talking about the movie. And by the way, it's a really good point, because it's sometimes hard to separate the novel from the movie when you start talking about these things.
Especially this one, David.
Especially this one.
Goldfinger being the most iconic film. I mean, you really got to shift out of that and get into Fleming's world, not Guy Hamilton's world, right?
And it's verbiage too. I mean, let's get into plot and story. And so with plot and story, one of the things that is really, really focused on here is this whole idea of happenstance, coincidence, and enemy action. These 3 seemingly coincidental meetings that come together. And then you've got this really fast-paced action and plot that just all come together. But Roland, we're going to start with you. Talk to me about the plot and story. How did they grab you?
Well, first of all, that whole thing, happenstance, coincidence, and enemy action, that whole concept struck with me. I always insert little Easter eggs, and I remember using that line because that stuck with me so much about how But in terms of the plot, I thought it was really interesting because you could tell he was so passionate about the idea of stealing gold, smuggling gold, moving gold. There were some great lines when he was in the Bank of England, and I loved the way he described walking into the Bank of England. You could tell he was like he'd been there, so he was describing exactly what it was. And the criminal caper seemed like an amazing one, but for me, where it kind of fell flat was we got to a certain point in the plot where, if Goldfinger hadn't killed Bond, everything would have gone perfectly. But instead, he had to kind of mechanism this whole idea of Bond becoming his secretary and being given a position of power and continuing to live, even though he was like his deadliest enemy.
Yeah.
And then the other elephant in the room is the fact that the whole idea of stealing all that gold with all the trains and the troops and everything like that was bonkers. And that's where the movie was so much better than the book in terms of plot, because the idea of exploding a nuclear bomb and irradiating the gold, that could work. That was like genius.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of actually trying to steal it seemed a bit, to me, that stretched beyond the realms of like believability.
I tend to agree. It's interesting. Alex Lamas in the chat says, as a novel, I enjoyed Dr. No more, but the darker tone of Goldfinger was a little bit more gripping. JW, comment on that for me. I mean, was it gripping for you? Was it the darker tone? Because you said you liked this. What were those things about the plot and story?
Yeah, I did. It's funny because I'm you're only as good as your drummer. And I think Fleming novels are only as good as the villain. And right before the holidays, I attempted to reread Thunderball and Majesties, and I just couldn't get into it. I'm going, uh-oh. Like, what is this? This is no good. And then with Dr. No, which I read along with you in preparation for that trip of yours, I was just captivated by the speeches that Dr. No gave. And the same here with Goldfinger. I mean, when Fleming starts writing in the voice of the villain and they're kind of explaining like how, what they're going to do. It's like, I don't even care what they're going to do. I just loved like the tonality of it or something, it's my favorite bit. I mean, if you said, I put a gun in my head and said, okay, tell me what the plot is on all of Fleming's novels, I might have a hard time discerning what exactly they were up to. And by today's standards, it seems a little, the whole train thing. I mean, the movie definitely does a better job of making it an action piece. But by that point, I'm so invested in the character, especially the villains. I actually reread those chapters when Dr. No and Goldfinger go on about who they are, where they're from. You got to get that Austin Powers out of your head, though. Yeah.
Well, I like the story plots when they tended to focus on Bond, like that. The first chapter, the whole thing about, the double bourbon.
It's my favorite chapter that Fleming's probably ever written.
Reflections in a Double Bourbon. I know, mine too. And it's because
awesome.
It's really kind of gearing you up that Bond right now is, if you look at some of his other novels before this, he was always saying, I don't want soft, missions or anything like that. Now he's saying, this sounds like I want a soft mission. Like, give me a break.
Yeah.
He's sitting back. I don't know how many of these, 2, 3, 4, he was drinking in the airport when all of that was happening. But I felt like in other novels, Bond as a character moved the plot and story along. You followed it along. In this one, you had these jarring halts, like making them secretaries.
Yeah.
And then typing some things. To me, it seemed to stall. And yet you had a book, and hear me out, you had a book that literally goes, and I had to write this down, from Miami to New York to London, then Kent, then Northern France, to Switzerland, back to New York, to Kentucky, to Washington, and then finally to the North Atlantic. Good Lord, Mr. Fleming. Yeah. 70,000 words later, I'm a little bit exhausted. Is this plot too exhausting? And by the way, I'd like to hear everybody's opinion in the chat as well. Jump in. What do you think, Roland?
I think, it's one of those. I love everything you just said, JW, about Goldfinger as a character, because the thing that I found jarring was how immersive the book was and how much it gripped me and how much it resonated with me with like characters like Goldeneye that I thought, Goldfinger, that was so beautifully brought to life. And then just those jarring incidents where it seems ridiculous for the plot to have continued to that point. Like, yeah, Goldfinger should literally have just shot James Bond in the head, but he didn't. He brought him in as secretary. And I think that's why they included that as a thing. We talk about Goldfinger being an iconic film. In some ways, the whole ridiculousness of the villain letting the hero live for no good, like as his secretary, that just, it jarred with me.
This is really good. Let me just read this quote from Moneypenny in the chat. I love how he reflected on killing the Mexican with his hands and then ended the novel killing Goldfinger with his hands as well. So, maybe part of this is interpretation and what you take with you. What do you think, JW?
Yeah, I mean, it's brutally written, especially the killing of Goldfinger, the way he just slowly, chokes the life out of him. I mean, it's pretty hardcore. And when I'm reading Fleming, there'll be those moments where I, go, either he says something kind of racy, or, it's just the brutality of Bond. But I got to say, circling back to the first chapter, Reflections in a Double Bourbon, I mean, Bond alone in an airport, just thinking about what happened. I mean, it's such a brilliant way to start a novel, and then he doesn't get an assignment. He kind of gets sidetracked. He gets pulled into it. And I love when they do that, where the mission comes out of left field. And, having sat in the Miami airport drinking by myself, I don't know, it's just whenever you can identify with something that Bond does, it's always exciting. To have that quiet moment, and just the way that Fleming writes with the short sentences and what he's seeing out on the tarmac and whatnot. I just think it's brilliant. It's Fleming at his best. But what he's reflecting on is no joke. I mean, it's an act of brutality. I mean, he's murdered with his bare hands somebody. Yeah. That's pretty powerful stuff. Fleming's just a master at it. There's always this moment too in Fleming books where I realize what a genius writer Ian Fleming really is. I mean, we're still talking about these books. He's just a master at it. And I think that's quite evident in this opening chapter.
It really does grip you. Because it's one of the first times, David, you said it was one of the first times you really feel like James Bond is like human. As opposed to... But he's human in a very different way. I love the whole way that meeting Mr. Dupont brings you back to Casino Royale and the opening of Bond. And to me, the development of Ian Fleming as a writer, how he gets so much more focused is evident there. But also, he's a different kind of human to how he was in Casino Royale. In Casino Royale, he fell in love, and it was, it was very romantic, whereas here it's more melancholy. It's more almost like he has PTSD, which you would understandably have if you killed someone with your bare hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to jump into, which is good, the character of James Bond, because I agree. Even though I really enjoyed it, maybe Dr. No ruined me with that, but I like the superhero version of James Bond. This was a really complex one. I mean, he's talking about the mortal trappings of life. He's talking about his life and reflecting. That's like big. But the other thing that I like about James Bond as the character in this is, they've always talked about him as kind of like St. George and the Dragon. This whole theme of that. And literally in this book, they have him talking about himself as St. George. And obviously Goldfinger is the dragon. And, to St. George, the knight, the brave knight, goes the beautiful damsel in distress. So it's interesting how he took that kind of insinuation and rolled it forward. But JW, talk to me about the James Bond and Goldfinger. Love him, like him. What did you think of him?
I love him, David. I must say, I might be the opposite of you. I prefer my Fleming Bond to be more of a human, less of a Superman. I don't know why. And it's interesting because when I read the Fleming novels, I don't picture any of the actors. I picture almost like, Jack Lugo, you'll love this, the sort of the cartoon character illustrated, like you would see on one of the older covers, just this nondescript, dashing man with the, the comma hair, jet black haircut. And so I don't know. I love when he's human, when those moments where he's fallible, where he doesn't get the girl, where he shows some humanity, is always really interesting. I mean, you just can't do that in the films. And I feel like there's a lot to be mined with Bond's inner monologue. I mean, whenever he starts to think, I kind of like, okay, I start paying attention to the chapter even more. Reread that sentence I just read. Wow, that's amazing. So I like the human, I like the way Timothy Dalton describes, how he wanted to play Bond as far as, the character that Fleming wrote. And I like that character very much so.
I know this is out of the blue, but we've got a request from Jordy to just do a quick toast to Yaphet Kotto. Rest in peace. Amazing actor. John, I love that you are saying this, because these discussions, and maybe it's when the drinks get a flowing a little bit, are not for you to come into the discussion and leave as the same person. You're kind of convincing me, not that you're trying to debate this with me, but you're right. I mean, the complexities and the humanization of this character is what makes the book so different than the movies and so enjoyable. So I would agree. And maybe what I'm not liking about this Bond as much is the situations he's being put into. So maybe it's not the character, but it's interweaving him with the plot. But Roland, what did you think of Mr. Bond here?
I thought what JW just said was really interesting, because there were certain sections I read.
Finally.
There were certain sections I read, and David, I think you said it earlier. They were like, this is one of the books where they literally just took chunks of Bond's dialogue and put it into the movie. Yeah. And so in my head, I read it as I imagined Bond was from reading the book. And then I'd actually go back and I'd read that same line as Sean Connery delivered it. And it reflected completely differently. There was one where he was in the Bank of England, and the Colonel Smithers says, "What do you know about gold?" And he goes, "I know it when I see it." And in the book, it's kind of like self-deprecating. Whereas when you watch Sean Connery deliver that line in the movie, it sounds kind of smug. And that was really interesting. That I think I agree with you, JW. To me, it didn't really work with any of the actors in my head, because just the character Bond was so much more human. You imagined him as someone take a step. I'm more like Tom Hiddleston.
By the way, this is the chat room in all its glory, is when we could be talking about something really serious about people being choked and death and murder, and somebody like Ray Cromfeld of the Bond Armory says, "Roland has a TARDIS?"
I didn't realize that Ray and his wife were Doctor Who fans like me. So,
well, we all know what a TARDIS is, even if you're not a Doctor Who fan. But is that a drape or is that a curtain?
That is a curtain. I had lots of bright white light from this completely blank white wall, so I thought I'd just put up something a little visual.
I like that. And by the way, the chat room, if this was a debate, I'd be losing. You two would be winning. Look at what Nicholas Cummings says. I have to agree with JW too. One of the things I love about Bond is the fact that he isn't the perfect hero. He's flawed, damaged, and despite his front, he seems to care. Makes for a more believable character. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we all have these thoughts, right? I mean, we all, when we're alone with ourselves and you're in these situations, whether you're traveling or whatever you may be doing, I feel like when I read Bond having those thoughts, there's something that I connect with the character in ways I just don't connect with, when I see him in the films.
I will say one thing I really did enjoy about Bond in this is that, I don't know if you guys found this, but he seems to have a better sense of humor than in the other books. I mean, even when he's tossing, Oddjob a little bit of shade, and he seems to be a little bit more sardonic and pithy, wanting to take the Mickey out of Goldfinger himself. And those aspects, I didn't see Connery when I read this book, but I got this Connery pithiness to it a little bit from time to time.
Yeah. Bond's very comfortable in his own skin in this novel, unlike previous novels, I feel, that definitely comes across, and maybe that's just the comfortableness that Fleming felt at this point as far as writing in that character's voice, and maybe that's why he said, "I have nothing left to say on the subject, you know.
JW, does that come, and you could speak authentically about this, Roland and I couldn't. Does that come from having a taste for a bachelor's life?
Yes, it does. I enjoy being with myself, you know.
Well, I mean,
I work very
not
hard.
biblically. I mean,
Yeah. Listen, I agree with everything I say. I guess so. You know, when you spend a lot of time, I mean, being an only child, right? You're kind of living in your own little fantasy world.
Yeah.
Not much has changed.
And by the way, some guy named Joseph Darlington says this was published in '59, so Fleming is already thinking movies by now. That's interesting.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
So even though obviously Connery wasn't cast or anything like that, he is kind of in that whole trying to make a deal type situation in movies.
They'd had Casino Royale, the 55 version, hadn't they? That little mini thing.
Yes, you'll have to forgive them for that.
Good heavens.
My eyes.
JW, what you just said, I found really interesting. Says that this wonderful quote from Ian Fleming, which is like, loneliness becomes a lover, solitude a darling sin. And I think he was at a stage in his life where like solitude was something that he found comfort in. And I found it really immersive, that first chapter and other chapters where he actually describes his thoughts in a way that was quite surprising for a book written in like third person.
Totally. This is pretty interesting. So Bill Koenig is pretty much a historian on this, said that Fleming got involved with McClory in 1959, as in Thunderball McClory. Whittingham delivers his first draft in January of 1960. So this is happening early, even before the movies that we know it. So, he's thinking movies. And, you know, it's interesting, though, because as we know, and as I just mentioned at the beginning of the show, Fleming, after he wrote this, I don't know if he was so exhausted or what it was, but he just said, I'll never do another book again. In fact, he goes on to obviously, you know, the next book, which is just a series of short stories, which we won't get into yet. But I mean, he does sort of throw the kitchen sink in. I mean, this is a kitchen sink pulp novel. Yeah. Everything is in here. You have multiple villains. And speaking of that, Roland, here's your cue to fly the flag. Here we go.
I would love to hear what the chat room says when I say this, because I know you have a very big British audience as well.
Yes.
In England, British people, for some reason, English people especially, have a weird thing with red hair. And like when I grew up in
England. Weird meaning
like,
bad or weird meaning good?
Weird meaning bad. It's for some reason being like...
Oh, we have that here in the United States too. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. We're fine.
Really?
Oh, we love Lucille Ball.
People think I'm completely insane when I say this, but people with red hair get bullied quite a lot. And, you know, that's another... Thank you for your sympathy, David. I appreciate it. But it is interesting. When Bond first meets Goldfinger, he sizes him up and it's like, oh, he's a short guy. And there's that beautiful section about short men with a source of every problem in the world. But it's like, here's a short guy and he has red hair. And I think he picked red hair specifically because it's like red hair is something else that would have made him the subject of bullying and stuff. Yeah.
Well, and he's done that before in other books of his. He's made hunchbacks with red hair as if, you know, it's like, it's grotesque. It's grotesque. But you know what? You know what's the worst thing? Is the red hair.
Yeah. It's such a weird. And so when I first left it, I mean, to be honest, it's going to sound ridiculous, but that's one of the reasons why I didn't like living in England and I actually moved to America. Oh,
look at this though. Licensed to Queer. David says ginger people account for merely 2% of the world's population. Everyone else is just jealous.
And I was just going to say, love Licensed to Queer's Instagram.
Yeah.
I salute you, sir.
Cool. Yeah.
And his views on gingers. And by the way, there was there was a horrible video about gingers not having souls. And a young man who said gingers do have souls. It's not been proven, but I think it's true.
What? And guys, hang on a second. Before I forget, what does he say about the line? Because I read it and laughed out loud. It's so atrocious. He doesn't trust people who are short. What was it? I mean, what was that? I got my notes here and I have written down. Does not like short people. Like
he thinks basically the world's problems are on because of short people. He mentions Hitler. He mentions Napoleon. Everybody.
It was
Bond
just like,
always mistrusted short men. They grew up from childhood with an inferiority complex. All their lives, they would strive to be big, bigger than the others who had teased them as a child. Napoleon had been short, and Hitler. It was the short men that caused all the trouble in the world.
yeah. I read that.
What
and
is
I was
short?
like,
What would you guys
yeah,
say
hang on a
short is?
second,
You're both tall creatures. What is short?
Well, I mean, Goldfinger is abnormally. He said barely 5 foot tall. I mean, like,
Okay. So I'm okay.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I
think
stood
5 foot is
eye to
okay.
eye with
It's
you,
not-
and
yeah, it's-
I didn't have to bend down, so that much.
Well, you picked me up like a baby, but I just thought you were being adorable.
That's funny.
What's going on?
But 5 foot tall is like it's not dwarfism, but it's
Yeah. But
And-
I also thought this was interesting what Fleming's doing here because what was that?
So my wife is actually 4'11" and a bit, and so
Oh, was that her talking? It sounded like
Yes.
Was that her
So-
voice?
yes,
Oh, she sounds 4'11".
she sounds 4'11". Gosh,
No, I mean, but big in tone.
she is like 7'10" in terms of personality.
No.
She's Italian.
Tell her that was JW. So we've got to talk about Goldfinger and the villains because a lot of people are commenting on this. And I tell you what, it was interesting always. I love how Fleming always sets up the bad guys. Like in this, when you're introduced to him and he's in the little gold bathing suit, which I got so many gold member thoughts in my head, like Mike Meyer type moments, but he's sunburned, right? He's like ruddy and red and, the ginger hair. And, to me, I was just getting this amazing visual picture. I think Fleming's kind of a master at that. JW, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, the way he describes things and his economy of words, he just uses such a little amount of words, but he paints this. Oh, what are we doing?
I'm sorry. Someone asked for a watch check.
Oh.
Yes, these things will interrupt your thoughts. You just have to go with it.
What was that? But he's so descriptive. You know what I mean? Like he just paints a wretched picture of this
economy of words, though. You were so right in that.
I love that. And I have to say, when I got to go back to Bond, because I got to go back to that chapter. What does he say when he says he's going to get stuck in Miami and is going to be carried home by whatever tart he can find?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But no, back to Goldfinger. I think it's a great description. I mean, you just know this guy is evil. If you gave us the assignment right now and said, in as little words as possible, can you write a grotesque character? It'd probably be pretty hard, And Fleming does it with just such ease. I mean, I marvel at someone that can look at someone, take a pencil, and it looks like them. They can draw that person, and I'm equally as amazed at how little words Fleming can use to create such a huge impact.
And I think that's also why Fleming was almost sued by the architect Erno Goldfinger, because, Fleming loves to use real people's names. There was an architect named Erno Goldfinger. And, basically, here's how the story goes. Upon learning the use of his name, Goldfinger threatened to sue before the matter was settled out of court. So luckily they settled out of court, but it wasn't the nicest, description alignment to somebody's name out there. That's for sure.
I can't vouch for this, but my father told me at one point that the settlement out of court was because Ian Fleming said, "Please stop this lawsuit. Otherwise I will include a beginning part in the book that says, apologies, the name Goldfinger should be replaced with the name Goldprick."
So that was in the Wikipedia thing too. So it's probably true.
I love it. But
were you about to say that? Did I just steal your thunder? I'm so sorry.
No.
Oh, right. I thought, I was like, maybe saving that one up because that's quite juicy.
Oh gosh, no. That was
do
perfect.
you think, David, that the use of the name Blackwell was inspired by Chris?
I think it could very well be, or actually Chris's mother.
Oh,
yeah, because they were Fleming and her were extremely close, very, very close friends. There's pictures all over Goldeneye of Chris's mother with Ian Fleming, actually. So it's really quite charming how close they were. But yeah, I think that, especially with Goldfinger, beyond even the physical aspect, Fleming really made this guy a little warped. I mean, the whole thing of like prostitutes and painting them gold. I mean, that little promo I did with I can attest that took like 9 cans of gold spray. So for him to want to paint a woman all gold, I mean, it's a little warped, unless you guys have tried it, and then I stand corrected.
I think gold paint was a lot cheaper then.
It was full of lead.
Oof. What a horrible way to go. And I mean, where did he get that from? I mean, that's the other thing. Now we have the internet. You can do all the research you need. The fact that Fleming could paint these characters and these places and the food, it's just amazing to me. Like, where did all this come from?
Yeah.
I mean, what did he experience? How was he exposed to know as much as he did about everything, and was able to put it in the books? I'm always impressed by that.
Well, I always think as writers, I don't think writers ever really invent anything. What they do is they live a life, and they'll have, like David, the whole thing about the Bond experience is living the Bond's lifestyle one moment at a time. Yeah. Writers will have moments, and they'll meet characters, and they'll have situations, and they'll meet people. And I find when I'm like, okay, I need to write a book, you get one single concept and you just grab that memory and grab like that person you met and put them in there. And it's like some kind of Frankenstein jigsaw puzzle that ends up becoming a story.
It's true. It's true. And, the one thing we cannot ignore, because everybody in the chat room is not ignoring it, is you got to talk about Goldfinger's right-hand man. Now, I will say, when it came to Odd Job, I couldn't get the movie Odd Job out of my head. That's all I could think about, the clothing. And even if you see like the Folio Society books, it's almost drawn like, like the gentleman who plays Odd Job in the film. And I thought it was an interesting character because there's some darkness to that character too. What do you think, JW?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's menacing, but you're right. You cannot read Odd Job. That dude, what, the Harold Sakata, is that his name? Mm-hmm. The actor? Yep. I mean, he is Odd Job. There's no getting around it. You know what I mean? But he is a little bit more demented. I mean, the whole thing with the cat.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus. And I was just
going, cat.
Oh, is he a ginger cat?
Ginger cat.
Yeah.
I thought he was a bald cat. No, that's no. He's a ginger cat, and he gives it to him as a reward and implies that he's going to eat it. I mean, whoa, that's a bit racy.
It's also a bit racist. I think that's kind of like that plies certain racist sentiment that was just spoken about by David's pursing his lips there, but it's like
no.
Ian Fleming.
No, it's a great point.
Yeah, he just kind of he speaks about these things as like matter of fact. It's like Jews aren't allowed at the Floridana. He doesn't go into whether that's right or wrong. He just reports it. And but with the cat especially, I know there is all these stories about like, Asian people eat cats, keep your cats away from Chinese restaurants. There's a lot of racism there. Is that something that's legitimate with Koreans, or was that like some kind of like racist belief that he had that might not have been factual?
Oh yeah, I mean there's a lot in here of that. I mean, you can't ignore it. There's some things that Fleming does, and as a Bond fan, a couple things, and JW, you and I have talked about this in videos, looking at things through 2021 eyes. But even for 1958, Fleming was pushing, obviously, his thoughts. He thought that there were certain sexual perversions, which we're going to get into when we talk about the women. And they were perversions. They weren't natural to him. They could be corrected with the right gentleman's touch, so to speak. And we'll talk about that. But as he spoke about, obviously, Asians and other individuals throughout the books, a lot of people say, well, this is Bond's point of view, but many times Fleming will write about people he knows, locations he's been to, and points of views that he has. So that aspect can't be ignored.
Well, what's interesting too is I think it was Terrence Young was talking about how they ended up having lunch every week with Fleming, and he said that for all the food descriptions in his novels, Terrence said he was just sort of blown away because all he had was what is it, Brandy Alexander's or something, or ginger ale and brandy and scrambled eggs. And that Terrence Young was having these huge course meals to the point where he felt so guilty and said, Ian, I can't let you, they rotated on who paid. And he said, I can't do it. But he goes, I'm amazed. He was amazed at when reading the novels and he sees the description of all the things Bond would eat. And yet Fleming didn't, you would think Fleming ate that way and he didn't. So
that
where's
was
he
an
getting
interesting
that from?
I'll tell you, that was a story that I heard at Goldeneye, because some of the people that are there, I mean, were there that long ago. It's amazing.
Wow.
And one of the things, because you can eat like Fleming ate, is Fleming didn't eat ackee and saltfish and scrambled eggs and things like that every day with a lack of creativity. He was a man of routine. He would write 2,000 words a day. He would go snorkeling twice a day. He would have drinks at this time. When he was given a bill of ill health and told, you will die if you keep smoking this much and drinking, he said, F you very much, and he kept drinking. So this was a man of great habit who couldn't really go against that. But when he traveled, which he traveled a lot, he ate like the locals. And that's when he had this exotic food and things like that. Like JW, if you come to my house, you'll have borscht. No, you won't have borscht. I hate beets. Hate them. I'm going off on a tangent. Odd Job, I will say this. To me, Odd Job has one of the most interesting demises in any Bond book ever, which is, of course, the Goldfinger demise from the movie of when he gets sucked out. And he is so descriptive about, first it's the head, then it's the shoulders, then his big butt gets stuck, and then boop, he's like a gun. I read that, and I'm going to raise my hand, like the warped individual I am. I read it 3 times, German 3, and just because it was so fascinating. But I mean, any Odd Job moments that stand out to you guys?
The karate, karate obviously isn't as well known. I don't imagine it was as well known back then as it is now. And Fleming's description of, how, he engaged in combat, I felt was very interesting, to hear him talking about karate. And if you're reading this in 1959, 1960, you're probably reading about these things or not that familiar with them, which I think is really interesting. How did Fleming know about karate? But I love that whole combat thing. I also love the fact that Bond was writing a book.
Yeah.
Stay Alive, Hey, there's somebody's Instagram. There's somebody's Instagram account right there. But I love that Bond was writing a book and then he was confronted by this master. It sort of elevated up the stakes of how badass, and hand-to-hand combat Odd Job was.
And I got to read this from Joe. I think he got the quote right. This is a Fleming quote. I won't waste my years trying to prolong them. I think I got that quote right. I think he did too. That was typical Fleming, and all the stories about him at Goldeneye were just that. There's even a picture of him and his wife sitting there, and one of the maids is serving him a tall, John, you would love it, JW, a tall tiki drink. Oof. And he's like this, and she's like, because he wasn't supposed to drink so much anymore. But
so I've been trying to do
I was right there with him last night.
I was trying to do the Bond fitness challenge, but I just couldn't get up to 70 cigarettes a day.
I think you may have misinterpreted it.
That's classic. Oh my God.
By the way, Bill Koenig's got a great point. How did Fleming know about karate? He was a journalist, which involves researching things you may not have personal experience with.
I think Bill's right on the money there.
Yeah. And Bill meant to keep typing and go, "You dope." But he was polite.
In Austin Powers, there was the whole thing of judo chop, and of course, don't chop in judo. And it's like, I think at that point, I remember back, in the 80s, the British understanding of martial arts was very, very limited. Like my brother did judo. I don't think anybody does judo these days. And so I think he had an understanding, but I hadn't even noticed the whole the thing, which is obvious now. I feel like an idiot of him writing that book about self-defense and defense, and then being confronted by somebody who showed him how little he knew. It's the Dunning-Kruger curve right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger crew. Yeah, absolutely. Freddy Krueger scares the shit out of me, by the way. By the way, this is a legitimate question. The chat room is lit, even though John is not. Does JW no longer drink?
Hang on, just because.
Why are people so worried? He's not. This is not Nicolas Cage.
Oh, delinquency. All right.
Well, let me
there. Back on the horse.
Let me tell you something. We are at the top of the hour. I am very low. So here's what I'm going to do, folks. We're going to move on to the next subject, which is one of everybody's favorite subjects. But first, we're going to get some ice. We're going to get some bourbon because, ladies and gentlemen, this is the double bourbon. This is the second bourbon that he has at the airport. Slange. So we're going to fix ourselves a drink. Everybody get settled. So what are you doing, JW? You doing some rum?
Blackwell rum. Which is
Dude, that's a good rum.
Yeah, I like it just over some ice. I wish I would have had just that last night.
This is one of my favorite things that I ever own because I'm not really into like getting having things and stuff like that. But my wife once said, "What do you want for your birthday?" And I couldn't think of anything, so I thought of a line from an old spy show years ago, which is a drinks cabinet shaped like a globe, and she found it. And so it's something I didn't even know existed. And so I promise you, I don't normally do this at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but I was going to.
Hey, what is that?
So I don't actually have any bourbon in the house. So it is Proper 12, which is Conor McGregor's whiskey.
Oh, yes.
It's actually pretty legit. I thought he.
Wait, hold that up again. I heard that's pretty good.
It's $26, which is quite affordable. And as everybody knows, the best writing is done with Irish whiskey. And it's actually very good.
God, that tastes good.
All right, everybody get a glass of something. We got to do a cheers. We'll wait till get yourself centered. Get those glasses up high. Here we go. Cheers, everybody. Oh, that's dandy tasting. Oh, that's mother's milk. Oh.
The amber nectar, my mother calls it.
Is your mother on as well? Because I don't know if you heard JW's is here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
you got to invite your mom to these things. Why not?
Oh, I can invite my mom. I don't know whether she'd come or not. She might have far more important.
So we've got a couple people switching drinks at the top of the hour here. Mark,
I like the way you think.
Yeah.
Switch to a classic gin and tonic, and that is in the book too. We're going to get into that lifestyle thing because he drinks almost everything here.
Oh, I have opinions about gin and tonics in America in this book and everything. So,
by the way, Luann Waters is smashed right now.
Yeah, Mom. The tree falling far from.
I mean, she can hardly put that emoji in there.
She is. She's in Mexico on a beach.
Luann, we like your style.
Plenty of pina coladas floating around.
All right, folks. I got to break it to you. We've got to talk about the women. And it's interesting. I'm going to read you something here because I thought about Roland when I think about critics of people that write interesting things about women. So Elizabeth Ladinson, the general editor of Romantic Review, believes the character of Pussy Galore to be perhaps the most memorable figure in the Bond lore. Galore was introduced by Fleming for Bond to seduce her for proving Bond's masculinity by his being able to seduce a lesbian. That is the goal. To some extent, the situation may reflect Fleming's own opinions expressed in the novel as part of Bond's thoughts, where, in quotes, her sexual effusion is attributable to women's suffrage. In addition, Fleming himself put in the book, Bond felt the sexual challenge all beautiful lesbians have for men. Discuss.
Oh, man.
Oh, I have opinions.
Go ahead, Roland. Jump in.
Please, Roland, go ahead.
So, Dr. No, which you discussed last time, there was this passage where he described Honey Rider's buttocks as like those of a young boy. And Noel Coward was like and Pussy Galore especially is described as androgynous, but beautiful, but like the masculinity of her is the beautiful part. So I often wonder whether Ian Fleming was trying to tell us something there about maybe the fact that Pussy Galore was, she was a lesbian more through circumstance and environment, and she ran a gang of like lesbian gangsters, but she ended up in bed with him. Maybe he was saying that there's the line can be crossed both ways. Maybe, I don't know. Sometimes I think he was trying to express something about himself out there.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it was interesting too, because I was of two minds when I read this. Before I read kind of these opinions, I thought to myself, Pussy Galore is probably one of the best Bond women written, because she plays a really crucial role. Like, she's not a damsel in distress. You know, if she didn't have that change of heart, none of that would have happened. But it's almost like I felt like Fleming, who, you know, quite frankly, like probably most writers, Roland, you know, will put a ribbon of something they want to say within their writing, within their art. Mm-hmm. And I felt like he was trying to say in there, obviously, that he considers this maybe a perversion that could be corrected, which obviously wouldn't fly today. But it was interesting how there, both Tilly and Pussy are both lesbians, both can be corrected. And then in the end, of course, Pussy, who, by the way, like many of Fleming's women, talks about the distress in her life came as through abuse, which I think was very introspective. You know, in this case, it was an uncle with Honey Rider. You know, it was someone that tried to rape her and she wound up killing him. But what happens in the end is it creates I'll say this, not in his words, but a perversion of deformity that can be corrected by the superhero that is James Bond, if you're masculine enough. So I think for a topic of 2021, it's an interesting thing.
That's a very, it's a very, very multifaceted question, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, you know, you when I read some of the Fleming ideas, his perspective, I know a lot of times people want to say, oh, well, it's just a sign of the times or thing, you know. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that what's important is when you do read that, you go, well, that's wrong. You know, I don't fault him for, you know, he's entitled to, you know, what he wants to think and whatever the circumstances are, you know, that's for Fleming. But when I read that now, you do kind of roll your eyes a little bit. But at the same time, the fact that we now know in 2020 that it's common knowledge that this is not the case is the important thing for me, you know.
How about?
No, please stop me. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't there one too where he mentions that homosexuals can't whistle, right, in one of the Fleming novels, and you just go, "Good heavens!" I mean, the man was, you know, he was an alcoholic, okay, and you know he's writing from this point of view that is, you know, it's just wrong.
Well, if you think. Goldfinger as a character is fueled entirely by insecurity and inadequacy, and he wants to like prove it to the world. What is the ultimate? If you are a man and you are feeling inadequate and insecure and stuff like that, what is the ultimate fantasy that you could have? Is like curing a lesbian, and so maybe that's like a reflection of his own feeling of insecurity.
Absolutely, that's what I mean. This was a reflection of him to the pen, which again, to me, this is. As offensive as it may seem, and JW, of course, today, I mean, all of us, I would imagine, would be like just shaking our heads like, hey, you know, Fleming, what are you doing, buddy? I'm here trying to defend you. And we can't. I will say this, though. For me, it's fascinating to read a 1958 book and read that in there as a sign of, you know, some of the, you know, continental British aspects. And it is. It's historical that you've got to understand people thought that way. Fleming thought that way. Maybe some people even think that today. Some people, you know, felt like she was a convenient character. She seemed more fleshed out in the film. But I think we all kind of just shook our heads. That's the amazing thing about these novels. To me, you just captured a moment in 1958 of a guy who ate sadism and snobbery for breakfast.
Yeah. And David, I love the story. I mean, thank God you're hearing it from someone who's and you know, it's a talking head in a documentary, Everything or Nothing, where one of his former girlfriends said that his first approach to her is he walked up on the beach, planted one on her, and then just stopped, looked at her, and said, "Oh, gee, I hope you're not a lesbian." And that was his approach to meeting this woman.
Is that about the time that you stopped using that line in Los Angeles?
That is not gonna. No, that is. I never use that line. Let me be very clear. You're not.
The rumors are untrue. Absolutely.
If that's the only rumor, I think that's a very interesting story in that documentary she tells. You just going, God Almighty. I mean, here's a man who's coming from a place that's kind of hard to relate to.
Yeah.
But Roland, you nailed it. This is all born out of a man's insecurity, and just, not having the wherewithal, the intelligence to know the difference between what is right and wrong. But hey, Fleming obviously was a fallible man, and he put that in the books.
By the way, License to Queer has set the record straight. Thank goodness. Because a lot of eyeballs are going to see this video. He says, FYI, I am gay and can whistle.
I'm glad we were going to put that to red.
I was racing to Wikipedia to see if that was true or not.
That is the craziest.
You need to get that peer reviewed on the thing for the world knows it.
Yeah, you just go, good heavens, Ian.
Thank goodness we've got variety. Isn't variety the spice of life? We've got so much variety in the Bond community that we can talk about this. And by the way, as I read this, and I read some of these discussions, it may satisfy some of you to know that in 1959, his critics actually pointed that out as well, that it was a bit ludicrous in many cases. But I think that, Fleming was this, as we flesh it out more, Fleming was this person who was definitely fighting against change. He didn't think about what was happening even in Jamaica. That was about, almost the time of the revolution in Jamaica. So he's fighting against too many things changing. England, the empire, you're living in a ruin yourself. It's like, you don't want things to change, Fleming, do you? But things are changing. And this was his way through his prose to kind of fight against that, I think.
Totally. And, even people at the time were offended by it. It's not like it's a real sign of the times. But so I also think perhaps that sells.
I nailed it. I was just saying, the lurid. I mean, I write romance novels, and the lurid details of what attracts people into it. And so, if there's the infamy of him saying, like, "Oh, James Bond cures a lesbian," it's like everyone's like, "There are lesbians in it." And of course, in 1959, that was sounded exciting
and being a Southern man, we don't chase him around. That was part of that description.
Southern
as they do down south. Or whatever, however he worded it. And I'm from Florida, North Carolina.
Wait. So your last name's not Pepper? It's not J.W. Pepper?
No, but it's stuck. Thanks to
Isn't
Tom.
that so interesting? You did Tiffany Case was like an amazing Bond girl, and her whole story was the trauma that she had. And then you had Pussy Galore with the same thing. And those two books are like iconic in their descriptions of America. Yeah. It's very interesting. There's the mirror.
Bill Koenig says, for fans of the novel, if you want to read more about how it was adapted, check out the book Adrian Turner on Goldfinger. It was published in 1998. Little weekend homework. All right. I'm going to rescue you, my lovely, lovely panel, from this heated and wonderful discussion, because we're going to move into something right up my alley. Right up JW's alley. And I would say Roland. I've broken some serious bread and had a couple of drinks with Roland. So I would say he is well included in this. Gentlemen, we got to talk about the lifestyle in this book. This was plum. Yeah. I mean, he drinks, and I got this prepared. So hold on a second. Buckle up, everybody. So he drinks, obviously, bourbon. He drinks at Bill's on the Beach, Joe Stone Crab. He's got obviously the pink champagne. At the Floridian Hotel, he drinks again. Then on the Silver Meteor, he drinks vintage champagne with his caviar sandwiches. In Kent, he orders a vodka and tonic. He then orders a large vodka with a slice of lemon. On the Recluver, he goes through gin and tonics. Then he has, oh my gosh, I'm losing track of all the stuff he was doing. More bourbon, of course. So, I mean, it's not just that, it's the food itself. I mean, it really does. You could tell that Fleming is relishing when he's talking about the Stone crabs, for example, and all the melted butter and it coming on your chin, and that vinyl bibs, which I have one downstairs. I love that damn thing because it's right from the book. The food, if you're not getting hungry over the ham sandwiches with extra mustard, and I'm thinking about you, Michael Poplowski, in the chat room, that is just, he brings that to life like no other book. What do you think?
Yeah, Mike is, the culture of Bond is like fantastic because he really delves into that. But the thing that I love about like the Bond experience as a brand is you talk about live like James Bond one moment at a time, and it's all about moments. You said it earlier. It's like Ian Fleming lived by routine. He had scrambled eggs and stuff every day, but when he traveled, he ate like a native. And there are certain meals you might only have once in your life, but you remember them so vividly. And that was it. That when he was eating the soft stone crabs and drinking the pink champagne, I could almost taste it. And it was like, maybe he's only had that once in his life, but it was a meal that will stay with him for the rest of his life. And I know I have had meals like that. It's like there are the time I was Saint Michel Square in Paris when I was eating just mozzarella and tomato salad. It was just perfect. It's a moment that will stay with you forever. But then that's not my day to day. That's just one moment. Live it one moment at a time.
Yeah. And by the way, Alfonso, you'll be happy to hear that not only is Joe's Stone Crab still around, it is hard to get into. They've expanded, it's packed. And what's great is you can still order the pink champagne. They don't bring it out in flasks. Oh, man, I would love that. But you get bottles of pink champagne, you get the stone crab, you get the butter sauce, and you're just smashing that thing all over your face. Just get it into your gullet.
And as he's describing it, and then I don't know why, what really gets me is then he goes, and then the toast. I'm going,
he loves toast. He loves toast.
He's talked about toast before with caviar. He said it's not about getting caviar, it's getting enough toast for the caviar.
Yeah.
It's so British, but we are very serious about toast.
Yeah. Toasted on one side, if I remember correctly.
Why is that?
Too, right?
And it's funny that Marvel film where it's like, if toast is cut diagonally, I won't eat it. Yeah, toast, very serious business.
By the way, Johan has a really good point. JW, I know you're not picking up your phone. You're being respectful, but when you're done with this live chat, Miss Pearson called. Seems her dog's foaming at the mouth. She got him locked up in the shed and wondered if you'd like to come over and shoot it for her.
I understood that reference.
I got it too
because we're geeks.
I know. I love that.
Thank you, Johan, for making my day.
Yeah, that's true. Oh God, that is too funny.
But here's the thing: you don't get a lot in this book, which I'm totally fine with. You don't get a lot of description. Well, you probably don't in a lot of the books of Bond's sartorial kit, his watch, things like that. But I'll tell you what: for as many places he goes, Fleming was just right there with the food. And what I loved about Bond's, I said earlier, his pithy humor, is he literally will just turn to Oddjob and go, "You there, get me some food, get me some eggs. I want scrambled eggs. I want food." And, the food comes and, you're living it through him. I will tell you, confession time, 5 times during this reading, I got cravings for the food that he was writing about.
Oh, totally.
What's that about?
I mean, that crab meal was just that's the most memorable meal I've ever read described in a book.
Have you guys been there before?
And I love that you highlighted it and you did a post of it, Roland, because I just got it out of my head and I looked at your Instagram and I went, son of a bitch. He put it right back in my head.
I know. One of my days I want to go to Miami and have like stone crab.
There's a Bond meetup right there, David.
Question for Roland. Don't you have toast sandwiches, bread sandwiched around a slice of toast?
Nicholas, there was this amazing thing my parents had. It was like a waffle machine, except it made toasted sandwiches. So you butter the bread, then you put some bacon between it, squish it. It'd be like crisp. Oh, it was so good. So good.
Look at you. You're getting all emotional.
I know.
Hang on, Dave. I do have to bring up 2 things because someone mentioned it. I love it when I'm using his words. Bond takes a dump on something. One is tea.
Yeah, that means something else in England. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing in America.
I love it. Yeah, that's universal. Take a dump. I love that, and I love when he slams the guy for wearing Brooks Brothers.
And then Abercrombie and Fitch later.
Yeah, I
highlighted that as well.
He said, Brooks Brothers, you're out. I love it when Fleming takes a shot at somebody.
Well, that is what Fleming called, and they were called this. In the 50s, Brooks Brothers came out with something called, it was like a sack suit. And it was supposed to be very loose fitting, like was the American style. Whereas British, even today, if you go into London and walk around, everybody wears their clothing like it was sewn onto their body. Yeah. You come here, no offense, and it looks like they're whipped cream melting in the sun. So it's the sack suit just kind of hangs off of you. You have no human form anymore with Brooks Brothers sack suits. And that's what he was talking about. And I love that too. And by the way, JW, I hear through the grapevine that there's a big birthday coming up. And I'm thinking, even though we can't make hundreds of people a part of a birthday celebration for you, wouldn't it be interesting if you did get yourself to Miami, that everybody who can get there meet up, maybe at Joe's Stone Crab, have some crabs and some drinks?
Sounds great. And then hopefully go see the film. You know, what David's referring to, everyone, is I'm turning 50 October 16th.
I wasn't going to say that.
I have this idea that I want to be surrounded by all my friends, black tie, hotel lobby bar crawl through Miami Beach. It's a couple of weekends after the film should come out. So I just have this mid-century modern 50th birthday surrounded by, close, great friends, as many as possible. So maybe that's that birthday dinner, maybe the night before.
And by the way, I'm embarrassed to say Shamir, for like the 100th time, has a request for me. You guys going to wear your onesies while you meet up in Miami? Shamir, there are pictures of me wearing a onesie. You can find them. Just Google it.
I'm going to do it. That's what I'm going to go out in. Everyone's in black tie. Everyone's in black tie, and the birthday boy will be in a onesie. That's all. I
covered that onesie, I have to admit. Like I watched Goldfinger with my 9-year-old the other day, and he was like, that onesie looks really comfortable.
Yeah.
Wow. Joe Chupik. JW at 50, he's already dead.
Shots fired. Now, what do you think about the fact that Ian Fleming was of a certain age when he wrote this? Because, we three are around roughly the same age, and I think I'm trying to learn how to ride a Harley Davidson, so the midlife crisis is real.
Yeah. I got a whole midlife crisis checklist right now.
I got to tell you, and I'm not just like throwing, Tony Robbins talk out there. I turned 53, 2 months ago. Age is a number. I physically, mentally, this morning, my eyes opened up wide at 2:50 in the morning. I got up at 3:30 out of bed, and I've been going strong ever since. And I'll be going strong deep into the night. And my energy level is more than when I was in my 30s. And I think a lot of it has to do with, you see a lot of curmudgeon-y people out there. You see a lot of like negativity and, looking for drama. And if you exercise those things, not exercise, but like, the devil repels you, exercise, that type of exercise out of your life, you tend to stay younger. Now, I may have the wrinkles of a 53-year-old, but I don't know. I just think it's all an attitude.
I think this is one of the reasons why so many people gravitate around you, is because you live a joyous life. Yeah. And, we were like conditioned to be miserable. And this book, Goldfinger, it starts off with him feeling like so introspective and depressed and stuff. And it's like, to me, the whole thing that you exhibit and why you built this community is the fact that you do say, live one moment at a time, do something that makes you feel like Bond. And because all those moments eventually live up to a life.
Absolutely. But hang on, Roland, I want to circle back around and then get back on the book track here. What did you mentioned where he's at and Fleming's at in his life, and how this might be reflected in this particular novel?
He's starting to get into ill health because of his lifestyle.
Yeah.
And on
the back nine.
And I was going to say, not to let's say it might have affected his performance with the ladies, and this was the days before Viagra or Cialis, which I believe you recommend, David.
I love how you say Cialis. It's so exotic.
But it's like, maybe
only you can say this. By the way, as a writer of those kind of books, which wonderful. I love that you're the one that can bring.
Actually,
this up.
Interestingly enough, if you lick page 17 of each one of his books, it has Cialis on it, not Cialis, Cialis.
Yeah, page 146 is LSD. But I wonder if, he was of a certain age. This was the days before people said you should lift weights and do PX 91,000 and you could buy Viagra and stuff. So maybe he was feeling like, I think maybe he wasn't feeling sexually potent, and that's why this
some of the
book had that feeling.
Some of his vitality is starting to go. And maybe now that you say this, having read the book, I can see kind of where you're at with that.
And you kind of channel it. I know Bond was a younger character, but it's almost like he was doing therapy and putting his...
Well, I'll tell you, Bill's got a good point with this comment that he has. I'll tell you what I'm reading too, because one of the things I wanted to talk about with this book is the themes. And the themes are from a man who has lived a long life in a short amount of time and maybe is getting a little ornery in some of those aspects. And again, I think it's fighting against the change. For example, he does talk about gambling as a theme, but it's not really as a negative. He's basically also in this book talking about the British having to save kind of the Americans' bacon, which could have been Fleming's reaction to the lack of the U.S. support over the Suez crisis in 1956 that happened. The other thing I marked down is this whole idea of this strong British image, which Fleming desperately doesn't want to die out. If you've watched Downton Abbey, there's a holding on to tradition of this empire that still exists, but maybe not to the grandiose aspects of it. And this whole idea, this was interesting to me. If you notice, Fleming in this film surrounds the villains with war as evil. Like, for example, and I wrote this down, he says Goldfinger employs members of the German Luftwaffe, Japanese and Koreans for Operation Grand Slam. Goldfinger used sarin, which has been discovered by Nazis. Pussies Galore, all-women criminal gang, have some members that look like some young SS guardsmen to underline the connection of evil. So this was a guy who said, listen, post-war people, don't you forget about the evil of the war. Don't you forget about the threats to the empire. And don't forget about the pride of Britain. And that's a little bit like, as you get older, you get a little like, harumph, you kids get off my lawn. And
do you know that he even says that? He makes a harumph noise. I actually highlighted it. Like M says harumph specifically. And it's like spells it. Like
I didn't get a harumph out of that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I understand what you're talking about. I mean, it's like.
Well, JW, I'm going to ask you this question through channeling Joe. Did Fleming live a life that we can all envy and wish for?
That is a good question. Look, I want to go as long as I possibly can, but I mean, to buy that place in Jamaica, I mean, Jesus, that looks like a pretty good. I mean, what's the equivalent of that today to be able
Palm
to
Springs.
go? Well, I wish it was. But to go somewhere in the Caribbean and buy a little secluded place on a cliff in an exotic beach. I mean, that's something that sounds quite lovely to me.
JW, he paid $2,000 for the land and $2,000 to build the house. $4,000.
I'll write you the check right now. He's
But
there's some capital gains that were paid on that. I mean,
they say retirement is the biggest killer, though.
And I mean, let's face it. In some ways, especially with regards to the lawsuit, Bond killed Fleming. The stress of those lawsuits and his ill health. Boom, he's down. Right. A lot of people, agree with that theory, and I'm one of them. So, is it to be admired? I love his talent. I love his home. There are aspects of it, but good heavens, the man looked like death towards the end. It's amazing.
It's not a healthy life, certainly by our standards today. What I do love is how he writes about Bond's zest for living every moment of his life. And I always quote this Brosnan thing. I know it's not a Fleming thing, but it's that whole thing. What's the point of living if you can't feel alive?
Yeah.
Isn't that what he said? It is so true. It's like you wake up in the morning and you've got every opportunity. How is that, JW?
It's absolutely helping.
Right?
This is
Hair of the
wonderful.
dog.
Yeah, it is. I'm feeling so much better. Yeah, no, this is fantastic.
If you ever
Chris
fall on that
Blackwell-
wagon, you just have to roll straight back off.
By the way, Tim Hans is asking a legitimate question. How much is Goldeneye worth now? I can't even imagine. I mean, it's $10,000 a night to stay there, just to stay there.
And correct me, but at one point, Bob Marley owned the house, right?
No. So Bob Marley, Blackwell tried to get Marley to buy the house, but Marley actually refused. And that's when Chris Blackwell kind of took over all the different things.
Okay, got it.
Well, gentlemen, especially Roland, I want to ping your brain a little bit on this. As an author, we got to talk about critical reception, criticism. Goldfinger did receive more positive reviews than Dr. No, which is kind of interesting. I mean, this whole idea of leaving realism further and further in the past, but building it out. He got a lot of positive press. Does that surprise you for back then?
I don't necessarily think it does, because I think Goldfinger is better written than Dr. No. Dr. No, I think, has lots of good points, but to a certain extent, it doesn't grab me the same way. And towards the end, especially when he's like a test subject, it seems kind of almost like he was trying to write what he thought a screenplay should be. Whereas Goldfinger actually felt like a story. It felt like he sat down and he just like, I always say that writers are almost like radios. We hear signals and we have a typewriter, and like the signals go into our brain and we just interpret them as the best of our craft of writing can do. And it's like this story to me, it was telegraphed down and he put it out. And I think he didn't hear all the signals correctly. So he made some plotting errors, but the writing and the characters and everything like that are much more vivid than Dr. No. And I think that's why it had a better critical reception.
I agree. Yeah. JW, you surprised?
I don't know if surprise is the right word, but I agree with that. I mean, I think that, Roland, you're absolutely right. Having just read Dr. No and Goldfinger back to back, I think is a thriller, page-turning, mass market novel. I think that Goldfinger's a superior novel. I mean, David, you really sent, I know, a lot of us down the Dr. No rabbit hole recently. I mean, in one weekend, I read the book, I watched the movie, I watched all the making ofs, I watched the Criterion commentary on a Burn DVD-R, which is fantastic. And so I was so into Dr. No mode. And going, okay, how am I going to feel about this? And then as soon as I started reading it, I mean, I was just in. It's easy to come home, as we all do, after a long, hard day and throw on, a couple episodes of whatever your favorite show is that you're watching at the time. It's so easy to do that, to not turn on that TV at the end of a long day, get on the sofa and read a book. Like,
it's amazing.
And this one, I was going, oh man, I agreed to do this. Am I going to be able to do this? Like, and it was like, it was like meditation. It was like therapy. It was like, I'm going, God, why am I doing this, more often? And I will do this more often, but I think it was a testament to how well written Goldfinger is, and it's my number 3 favorite.
Wow.
Book.
Yeah.
Is it really? Because Fleming raised, this is interesting. This was considered one of the 99 best novels in England since 1939. I mean, that's saying something. They literally said that the thing that makes Bond attractive in this book is the sex, the sadism, and vulgarity of money for its own sake and the cult of power.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you just nailed it. So the whole thing about money and power and
power, lack of standards. Yep, exactly.
That is relevant today.
Yeah.
Like there are some themes that are, as far as values go and where we as society place values and interesting.
The thing that I loved about it was, and I think what worked so well was here, and to a certain extent, I can't remember the first person who made the comment, but it was, how this was a new version of Moonraker, but they both had this whole idea of somebody who was rich, who cheated for the sake of cheating. Like Goldfinger was unbelievably rich, but he wanted to cheat for the sake of cheating. And he became rich because he wants to prove something. It's all to do with inadequacy again. And it's like, And I think in terms of Ian Fleming, you were talking about not wanting things to change. In England, we have a problem with the nouveau riche, who were the people who were entrepreneurs, who made money but came from perhaps humble places, as opposed to like people who had money because they were landed gentry or something like that. And it was that clash in the 50s especially was really tough.
You Roland, you had a great saying, and I probably used it 900 times since you've told me. And I think it comes from England, but it was the whole idea of the tallest nail gets hammered down. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's very funny. British society has this weird thing where they love the plucky underdog as they rise up to a certain level. But then if they rise above their station, it's suddenly they turn from the plucky underdog to the upstart, and you need to hammer them down. You need to teach them some humility. Whereas what I love about America is in America, if you come from nothing and you become super successful, people think you're a hero because you came from nothing. In England, there's something to do with class is just, it's so difficult. And Ian Fleming manages to communicate it in this book in certain passages in a way that resonated with me deeply.
No media can build someone up and then knock them down harder than the British media. Like if it's a band, Oasis, we love you, you're the worst thing ever. What's the story? Be here now. Whoa. It's like, you guys, that's like an art form.
By the way, Mark, I just want to address something Mark is asking. Yes, the audiobooks are fantastic. I think audiobooks can be a lot of fun. I know JW does the same thing I do. Sometimes we'll do both. Do a little bit of audiobook, do a little bit of reading, kind of go back and forth. And it's kind of fascinating to do that.
Oh, I love the idea of like the different ways you tell the story. So there's Goldfinger the novel, Goldfinger the audiobook, Goldfinger the movie, and then Calvin Dyson was talking about like 007 Legends, the video game, where they told Goldfinger the video game type thing. And it's so interesting how the stories change and mutate in different ways, the different ways you tell them. That's what I love saying with romance stories. You could write in the format of a romance story, take another story, and just it becomes a different experience with the same story.
What is the tall poppy syndrome that Heather Green is talking about?
The tallest poppy has to get chopped down so it meets the height of all the others.
Holy cow, that's insidious.
Yeah. It's such a curiously British thing.
Wow. Go ahead, Jay.
No. I was going further down that rabbit hole. Let's keep going down the vine.
Well, here's a fun rabbit hole. We need everybody in the chat room to play along with this next portion. And here's the thing. Even if you didn't read the book, this part doesn't matter. Shh. All right. What we need to do is we need to have some comparisons between the book and the movie. And in discussing those, let's talk about sameness, let's talk about differences, and let's talk about where the movie maybe did it better. Roland, you want to go first? I saw you clapping.
I love this because I always think Goldfinger the movie fixed Goldfinger the book. In some ways, Goldfinger the book has so many things that are just amazing and special. I would argue the whole way Mr. DuPont, who he knew from Casino Royale, met him and asked him to investigate this cheat. I would say that part in the book is better than the way they handled it in the film. But like the ending, they turned what is a completely ridiculous, unachievable crime that stretched the boundaries of disbelief, and they managed to turn it into something that could actually work. And I love the way Sean Connery delivered that line where he's like, I misunderstood you, Mr. Goldfinger. That's inspired. Because you could tell it was like, to explode a dirty bomb there makes so much more sense. You could do that. It's believable. It's achievable. Whereas to split up Sean Connery describes every reason why it wouldn't work. And it's almost like Guy Hamilton was like, let's write out every single reason why Ian Fleming's plot was stupid, and then puts it in that.
I like this from Bill Koenig. Maybaum wrote in the memo that the buzzsaw must go. And I love that they used the laser because then it factors in even later.
It's 1963. So. That is so 1959. Honestly.
Damn it. I want my heroes to die of a buzzsaw. I was so
Who uses a buzzsaw?
Yeah. Buzzsaw is so 1943.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, I tell you, as I was reading this, the things that were coming into mind was how much I I kind of ding Goldfinger probably because of its popularity. And if you've heard any of my videos, I always go to Thunderball and From Russia with Love, and I've re-explored Dr. No because my Jamaica visit. And I don't talk about Goldfinger too much because it's too easy. It's got all the tropes and everything like that. But this book actually made me appreciate the movie more because I do think that they allowed you to go along for a better ride that just wasn't for location's sake. Like all the issues I had for it, an hour and 40 minutes ago, it fixed it all. I mean, and that's why it's kind of like the perfect Bond movie. Like if somebody says, hey, I want to watch a vintage Bond movie and they've never seen a Bond movie, I probably wouldn't put them in front of Thunderball, which is like my favorite. I'd put them in front of Goldfinger, which I think encapsulates kind of the kitchen sink mentality he meant to do in this book. What do you think, JW? Am I crazy?
No. I agree with you 100%. I got to admit, this time the book really filled in some gaps for me. Mainly Goldfinger. I know Gert Frobe couldn't speak English, and that dub job is incredible. Like I cannot believe that they pulled that off. That he was just sort of, it's amazing.
I wish they didn't in a way, because if you watch the trailer, there's it's him not dubbed, and he's actually doing okay.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. But I love the books for me set Goldfinger up much more. Like you really know this guy's demented. Whereas I think Gert, just like his physical presence is so disturbing. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but he was sort of considered and cast. He had done something where he played a child molester, right?
I think that I vaguely remember.
Yeah, and they saw him in something where he played a child molester, and you kind of look at him, and he's got this look, none of which has anything to do with being ginger, by the way.
But he was in the movie.
So I'm actually excited tonight to potentially watch Goldfinger, having just read Goldfinger. I think it might be on my set.
I might too, because I've been dying to I wanted to do this first. What I didn't want to do is have the movie adulterate this discussion, because it does. It is overwhelming. But I tell you what, as I read this book, I do love the fact that the people in charge of the franchise, the movie franchise, really did go out of their way to put in a lot of the aspects of the book into the movie. And I have to tell you, I love when they do that. Like with Dr. No, they have the whole Bond getting sick after he kills the centipede. They have that in the movie when he kills the tarantula, like little things like that. I think that's, I geek out with.
Well, and David, I think that's really cool. And I kind of picked up on that. There's a lot of little things that they throughout the course of the films, they've mined from this book. Regret is unprofessional. There's all these little lines, and I'm going, they used that in another movie, or that.
I think more than perhaps any movie, they took specific lines of dialogue. I highlighted them, like gold. I know it when I see it, and things like that. I highlighted it because they were the exact same lines.
Yeah, they're just still mining this novel from the films, which I think is lovely. It always puts a smile on my face when I go, that's an M7.
And by the way, AJ's got a good point about me getting the big bottle. I meant to get the big bottle, but one of the things that you have to understand is Bond had 3 double bourbons in that one scene. David needs to have 3 double bourbons in the Bond book club. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I love the way you talked about the mining the book material, because there's the scene with the identikit machine, which is taken lock, stock, and 2 smoke and barrels and used in for Your Eyes Only.
Yeah,
and it's so interesting that I think there are so many other scenes in books that get borrowed and put into later movies, but that's one of the first times I noticed it lifted up and put into a different movie.
By the way, I love what Morgan is saying here. Morgan's essentially saying Goldfinger, the film, is great because the novel's fantastic. And they're absolutely right. I mean, one feeds off of another. And I think what I found with this Bond book club is these novels are enhancing the movies for me. And JW, I think you nailed it. It's almost like I want to know a little bit more about the character, Goldfinger, for example, and this fleshes it out. And there is nothing more canon than Fleming. I'm sorry. Yeah. Even Maybaum and the writers, there's nothing more canon than Fleming's Tombs.
When people talk about the success and the love of Casino Royale, the film with Daniel Craig, starring Daniel Craig, I've often said that part of that, the reason for that success is Fleming's in the room. Like you can feel Ian Fleming, his writing, and them going back to that novel. And, you know, a lot of praise is given to a lot of people that deserve praise for that film being so good. And I don't think in the Bond community, we've talked enough about Fleming's contribution to that success. You know, I mean,
it is. I mean, even, and by the way, even the Barbs, I mean, a book club is not just a gush fest. It should never be that. We need to talk about the controversial things. If we were doing this, just the three of us in a pub, we would do that, of course. So we do it here. But you're absolutely right. I mean, Fleming has got to be put up on shoulders of sparking all of that. Everything you see in the film itself derived from the well soul of everything that he conjured up. Just like when they make Roland's incredible books, you know, into a movie. You know, when No Way Out with Kevin Costner becomes a movie.
I'm going to tell you, I want this to be the next Fast and Furious franchise. So I'm not even joking. I'm going to try and get I was writing these stories and they ended up meaning so much to me. And I came out to the romance readers and I said, like, look, I'm sorry. I know I've been writing as Simone Scarlett, but I'm actually Roland Hume. And they were so amazing and kind to me and stuff. But it's like, the stories that I'm telling mean something. And I'm sure the stories that Ian Fleming was writing meant something. When you write, you take a piece of your soul and you put it out there and you channel so much. This book originally started off as a romance novel and I rebranded it and read it again. I was like, wow, there was a lot I was going through at that point that I wrote about that I didn't even think about until I read it again now. And that's what I love about the Ian Fleming books. It's like you can see certain aspects that he's channeling of his own personality. And the whole thing they say about when you sit down with a paperback book and you read it, it's like meditation, but you're not just in your own mind, you're in the mind of somebody else, because the purest flow state ended up on those pages and now you get to be part of it.
You and JW have used that twice today, the whole idea of meditation. And I have to tell you, when I read a book, what is that child doing in the room? I'm going to send the lollipop catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang. What's that kid's name?
This is Oswin, who just turned, how old are you?
I'm 8.
Yes, she just turned 8.
Happy birthday.
Hey, Oswin.
Yes, and she's just doing she's taking pictures with a raccoon. There we go. So, I'll tell you what.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3.
All right, so if you push her out of the room, you have 2 more, right? I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm kidding. I love kids and animals.
The showers went from the...
I will come and help you out in 10 minutes. Go
Yeah,
to
but
mother.
do you know where it went?
No, I don't.
I hope she's not
Sorry.
reading.
I'll tell you what.
She's too young for Fleming.
Explain to
Fleming
her
was
that
much better than my books.
explain to her that we've lost 28 followers because of her. Thank you, Oswin.
She's adorable.
No, she's cute. She's cute. She could stay. But let me get back to this, because I think this is a point I'm pretty passionate about, is, you know, everything that we're kind of talking about with these books. For me, it is, I always say this, it's escapism. And I use the movies for that. But what I found with the book is I really need to, like, I can't be listening to music. I can't have the TV on. I can't be too screening. I literally put my phone someplace else or I turn it off, because it is, you know, it's tunnel vision. And I almost feel like the respect that I have of Fleming now, it's almost like paying deference to him. It's like, I don't want to like miss the second or third word, because you were very purposeful in that second and third word. And I think you guys feel that same way, because you've used meditation before.
Yeah. No, it's nice to tune out the world and get focused in on something specifically outside of a screen. You know,
I think what he did so well was I read that book and I inhabited the mind of Bond. And I think in some ways, because most of this book is told from the point of view of Bond, instead of going to other characters and other places, which he's done quite considerably in the past, that's why it just like sucks you in. I write my books in first person perspective because it's like a cheat code. If you write, I am doing this, or I see this, then you suck the reader in with a cheat code. Whereas Ian Fleming does this really, really well with the third person perspective, to the point that it was like I'd stopped being myself and was just James Bond reading this book.
Yeah.
By the way, there's been an interesting observation.
Uh-oh.
Martin says, Roland, has anyone ever said how much you look like Prince Harry?
I might have occasionally got into a nightclub by pretending to be his body double, but
No.
It's funny.
I
Just
do
out of
quite look like.
curiosity, what was the nightclub called?
I might tell you afterwards.
It was called For Your Eyes Only. It was a
I
gentleman's
want
club.
to know because in England, the nightclubs always have funny names.
Oh my, yeah. I have tinnitus to this day from working in a British nightclub at 19.
Got it. That's funny.
All right, so we're going to put the movie aside. I think we all agree that they've borrowed some amazing things from the book. There's a lot of comparisons. You know, the novel fills in all those wonderful gaps, and the movie is a classic. I mean, it's a classic because it's born of the book. So I think we can all draw the conclusion with that. Gentlemen and chat room, couple things. First of all, what's interesting as we read some of the history with this, Goldfinger, like I mentioned, had amazing reviews, sold more copies than any of his previous novels. And it's interesting. It's almost like it's a little like Daniel Craig, you know, they quit and then they're suddenly brought back because there's something that's untold, perhaps a story that's untold. And For Your Eyes Only is going to be our next book club. Now, what was interesting is I've gotten a lot of questions already from people like, how are you going to do it? Are you going to have a book club for every story? And the answer is no. We're going to have a kind of a giant book club. It's going to be longer than 2 hours, but we're going to be doing it in a very unorthodox way that I'm not ready to talk about yet. But as we start to close off, the one thing I've always respected about Fleming is the man has passion that cannot be untethered. He is a content creator. And if he was here today, he would probably doing writing for blogs, Twitter, online, BuzzFeed, who knows? But I want to talk about your individual projects a little bit because, you know, again, this is something that is born and bred of people that just feel an extreme passion. You know, I'm going to reiterate, you know, John, didn't mean that for that to fly out at you. You know, with the Bond Closet, that's something that where you've taken your love of sartorial kit, of music, of locations and travel, and you've pulled it together. But what is that passion that burns that you feel like you need to share it?
I want it to be like you're reading a magazine. If the way I'm presenting it is that you're turning the pages of a magazine, and I really enjoy writing the text. It doesn't go. I actually sit down and I take a minute and I think about. It's not something I'm on my phone and I write. Like there's method to my madness, and I share. You know, okay, well, this is what this is. Here's how it is. How I've incorporated it in my life. This is what I'm listening to when I'm, you know, I'm wearing this or doing this. So it's really just it's almost like a diary that I'm making public in the form of a magazine. There's so much amazing specific content out there. But for me, it's just sharing my life with people that I care about. I mean, what is, you know, that to me is the essence of Instagram.
So let me tie that into Fleming for a moment, because I thought about this, obviously.
Okay.
With Fleming, one of the things he loved to do, and it's on record, he's even said it in interviews, is that he writes about his life. He uses names and people that he encounters. He uses locations and food and clothing. And the reason he does that is it grounds people in reality. And I think what you're embarking upon with the Bond Closet, and we've teased about this on the video that's coming up in the next week or two, of like, there's everything out there. There's a Bond floor and a Bond apartment. Now there's a Bond closet. Soon there'll be a Bond roof.
The flooring of Bond is a work of art as an Instagram channel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the reality is that you and sharing those pleasures and turning them into stories that people can consume, I actually say is very Fleming, truly Flemingish.
Yeah. I never thought of it that way, but perhaps you're right. I mean, that's what he was ultimately doing with his novels, sharing his passions, things that he learned through his experiences. And perhaps that's what I'm doing. You know, I'm just.
And even from a more literal standpoint, what I think Roland's done in putting pen to paper and characters, and I will confess something, I don't think Roland will mind, that he's even filled his pages with people he knows, like one David Zaritsky and Casino Zaritsky, for example. Did you know that, JW?
No, I did not. I'm gonna
book.
go out and I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna purchase it and I'm gonna support.
No,
you.
I'll tell you what. If you want, I'm
Good.
so excited by this. This is the as a romance novelist, I'm writing a series.
That's me, by the way.
It is like we had to get Danielle like painting on the tattoos and stuff like that. It was.
You did great.
Yeah, PX90 works. You can clearly tell. But it's funny being part of like the Bond community for me reinvigorated like my love of telling stories and things, because I love the constraints of romance novels, but I love telling stories and getting in there like Ian Fleming does. And so I write my books in sort of story arcs, like seasons of a TV show. So this is the first one, and my romance readers always get it first. It's going to be like this big, long story arc, and it has this casino owner called David Zaritsky. Zaritsky's Casino and Lounge. It's like it's in my books,
and he likes fried chicken and pickletinis.
Oh, you wait till you see where the fried chicken gets in. But my next book, that's out soon.
By the way, we're speaking of passion.
Somewhere, what's happening here?
This is funny. So everybody thought this is my son. This is my brother, Joel Zaritsky. He says the passion you all have really shines through. So I've got to tell you, this is how our family raised us. And I don't think any of you know this. My brother, who is a very, very accomplished dentist, has his own practice. He's a professional like me. However, that's just his day job. By night, he is so into Batman. He has outfits from the movies and things like that. And he is a magician. He's a performer. He's literally the president of the, I think it's either global or United States, Joel, correct me on this, magic society of like, I think the United States. So wow. That's how into magic and Batman. So how I'm into Bond, he's into all that. So I think our parents must have done something hellacious to us.
I was going to say, you know what? I want to be a parent who makes a kid like you. Like that is something that comes
like a reject.
No, just your passion, enthusiasm, the joy you take in life is so. Like I want to be a parent who creates a child like you. Listen,
you did Oswego. Your daughter, is that her name? Oswego.
Oswin.
Automata. What?
Oswin.
I will remember that. Is that a Harry Potter name, by the way?
Actually, my wife picked it out. It's from Doctor Who, would you believe? Yeah, we were going to call her Morgan, but we ended up with Oswin. But
very
Oswin's
nice.
Cool. Yeah,
very cool.
And Roland, I'm not finished with you because again, you know how much of you, and you didn't know I was going to Barbara Walters you today. How much of you, when you sit down to write, and by the way, this man does this for a living. We do this for fun. JW and I, this is our hobby. This man, he writes for a living and is well gainfully employed, supports a wonderful family. How much of you starts to channel Fleming or the Fleming process or any of that inspiration?
Ian Fleming, the way he wrote and described things was like so incredible to me because it was so concise. JW, you talked about like his economy with words. You know, Ernest Hemingway had the iceberg method, which is where you have like just a little bit of information that implies so much. And David, the use of brands, for example, I find that so interesting. So in the Dr. No discussion, Jeremy Duns was talking about how real life brands can like ground somebody. Yes. So when I was reading all of the Ian Fleming books, I come from the same kind of background as Ian Fleming. It's like even in Goldfinger, he talks about how Lord Cowdrey was one of the richest men in England. And it's like, you know, I used to go and watch polo matches at Cowdrey Park. So I was in that. So when he talks about, you know, drinking Liebfrau milk or Cinzano or something like that, that was my experience growing up. That's what my parents drank. And then you had these exotic things like in Goldfinger in America with these they weren't exotic brands. Miller High Life isn't an exotic brand.
Right.
But they were so exotic to me growing up in England that they seemed like magical and stuff. And so hopefully what I do when I write is like try and channel the ways I've enjoyed and had been touched by all of the experiences I've been privileged enough to have. And I think that's what he does so well.
That's amazing. And I imagine like when you do a book club like this and you read Goldfinger, you've got to put down the book as a writer and go, oh man, I love what he did here. Like, you
Why
don't.
didn't I think of that?
Yeah, why didn't I think of that? Or I know that you've used, for example, and I love how you do it. And gosh, the book is you use Star Wars, which again, Star Wars used film, Sarakawa and things like that, and Magnificent Seven and things like that to really feed from. Maybe we'll just constantly feed from all of this.
I think somebody said there are only a certain number of stories, but it's like you can retell them. And so what I'm working on now is like taking a particular story that was always told in like third person in the 60s or something, and then you tell it as a romance novel with alternating points of view in the contemporary days. You have to change things and evolve them and stuff, but it's like reinventing the same story. It's like different but the same, and it's exciting.
Is there a line, gentlemen, from this book that is a line perhaps you wrote down, highlighted, that is sort of your favorite line from the book? This is a loaded question, by the way.
Yeah.
Because I literally stopped, reread it, stood up, paced around the room, and was like, it's the greatest line of any book I've ever read in my entire life. I'm
going to volunteer one first since you asked the question.
Yeah, I'll go last.
My favorite line, believe it or not, it's almost like it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's literally the very first line of the book. James Bond, with 2 double bourbons inside him, sat in the final departure lounge of Miami Airport and thought about life and death. It's so big.
Yeah.
He's not thinking about, where do I buy my next Tiger Beat magazine, like JW thinks about.
I tell you where that is.
Right. I mean, he's thinking about something big, and that is Bond. I mean, Fleming's Bond is he has death for breakfast. And to think about that and contemplate that after a kill, he's not this cold, calculating person. He's complex. Damn it, JW, you won me over on this book, idiot.
Yeah.
My favorite line was Goldfinger's second lesson. When the odds aren't right, make them right. Like there's some very real, true things that Goldfinger says that you can
Yes.
That's a great one.
JW, give.
This is the one that got me. The valley was green, wide, and dressed for love.
Wait, what? Where was that?
The valley was green, wide, and dressed for love.
No, I heard every word you said.
I know. I had to
what
say
is that
it
in
again.
Reference to?
When he's driving through, where was he driving through?
Oh, right. When he, with the DB3 and he.
I forget what country he was in. There's so many.
Switzerland.
Sorry. And I just thought when I read that, I went, oh my God. Like that is such a phenomenal line. I mean, he wrote that. Like he came up with that in the middle of this passage. And I thought, man, I'm going to use that at some point in my life.
By the way, everybody in the chat room, share your favorite line. I know some of you are.
Yeah. Let's share our favorite lines.
I'm curious to see
because the other one was that I loved is the last thing Bond wanted to do was play with Goldfinger.
Now, why do you like that one?
This gets me in the funny bone. Oh, anyway.
It doesn't take much.
If only pretty girls were always angry, they'd be beautiful. Well, I would like to introduce everybody to my wife.
My God.
By the way, does she want to come on camera since we've heard her before?
Come on.
That was Joe's as well. This is great.
Yeah.
Goodness in this book.
Wait, she's coming. She might kill me on the.
She heard that line. There she is.
Hello. How are you? Thank you for letting him.
Nice to meet you finally.
Yes. Nice thanks for letting him play today.
There was a line I got here. Chapter 5. London lay asleep under a full moon. The road swiftly over the town through a shoal of herringbone clouds. And it's like you think herringbone that it's like you take something completely different, like the stitch of a cloth, and then you put it into what the clouds look like. I love that.
Yeah. By the way, Jack Lugo put up the one that I think could be a theme of an entire online event. Mr. Bond, they have a saying in Chicago, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, the third time it's enemy action. I think any one of those could be like the 3 hours that you cover.
Oh, and
Well,
there's
and
a
I
Rick
think
Speed saga. It's doing that. Yeah.
I think that's brilliant that he took those three and used that as the structure of the novel. I mean, to sit down and go, like, I mean, and then to start from there, you go, okay, I don't know, it builds some like excitement, some anticipation of how that's going to play out. I think it's a brilliant way he structured this book. Hell, the more we talk about it today, the more I'm liking.
I seriously, I'm not kidding.
I could reread it now.
My elevation of the book has gone up like a minimum of 20 to 25% since this conversation. It really has.
Yeah.
This is cool. Not a favorite line, but Bond picks the Aston Martin because he thinks it fits his cover better than a Jaguar. That decision has affected the films. Yes, it has. So the DB3 turns into the effervescent DB5, which, by the way, is still going to be coming out when No Time to Die comes out with DB5. I mean, all these years later, that DB3 from the Goldfinger book influenced a film that'll be showed, hopefully, in 2021.
Isn't that incredible?
It's crazy.
But you think even every single, like Ian Fleming's books, he would take real people. It's like every single author who writes a book that comes from 200 different people that he might have met. Like, I'm writing a book that has all these different people I different met, and then it becomes a film, and then it becomes something else, and it brings Aston Martin and all the people who behind Aston Martin. Isn't it incredible how so many different people are involved in every single thing that we enjoy culturally?
And by the way, Mark Scarbeck actually has JW's 50th birthday mantra, which is, I'm going to get drunk, stink drunk, and let some random tart carry me home.
When in Miami. That should be the city logo.
Look at this. Regret was unprofessional. Worse, it with death. Watch a beetle in the soul.
Oh, I like that line, Bill. That was
Ooh.
a really good
a good
line.
one. Yeah, regret is unprofessional. I'm going to use that one as well.
My
And
gosh.
death beetle in the soul, though. It's like, death beetles, they burrow into a tree, and so they'll eat the heart out of the tree, but the tree will remain standing until suddenly it smashes. And it's like that. It's like the human being can remain standing, as Silver said in Skyfalls, taking his pills and drinking his alcohol and his women and stuff. But then eventually, because the soul has been rotted out, it cracks.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And by the way, Michael
In one
Poplawski of you're going to love this. This is his favorite line. Lock the door, pussy. Take off that sweater and come into bed. You'll catch a cold. By the way, this is why Michael Poplawski's not allowed over my house anymore, strangely enough.
Hey, Michael's got a point. That's common sense. I mean, that's just good fashion.
Shouldn't you keep the sweater on?
No.
And by the way, no small coincidence, JW's wearing a Goldfinger sweater.
Oh, yeah, I was trying to represent. Yeah.
Well, take it off and come to bed. You'll catch a cold.
I'll be over in a minute.
All right, gang. Well, listen, we are going to let everybody continue their weekend, but I cannot thank enough my compadres here, JW, Roland. Thank you so much for making this a great conversation. Cheers to all of you, to you gentlemen, to everybody in the room. And I've got some news for everybody I thought I would share. The news is this. We'll be back. And the Bond Book Club will return for your eyes only. So until then, I wish you all the best. Stay healthy and go watch Goldfinger. I think you're going to enjoy it.
And read
Take
it.
care. And read it. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.